The Theory of Moral Sentiments by Adam Smith. Part 1. Of the Propriety of Actions, consisting of 3 sections. Section 1. Of the Sense of Propriety. Chapter 2. Of the Pleasure of Mutual Sympathy. But whatever may be the cause of sympathy, or however it may be excited, nothing pleases us more than to observe in other men a fellow feeling with all the emotions of our own breast. Nor are we ever so much shocked as by the appearance of the contrary. Those who are fond of deducing all of our sentiments from the certain refinements of self-love, think themselves at no loss to account, according to their own principles, both for this pleasure and this pain. Man, say they, conscious of their own weakness, and of the need which he has for assistance of others, rejoices whenever he observes that they adopt his own passions, because he is then assured of that assistance, and grieves whenever he observes the contrary, because he is then assured of their opposition. But both the pleasure and the pain are always felt so instantaneously, and often such frivolous occasions, that it seems evident that neither of them can be derived from any such self-interested consideration. A man is mortified when, after having endeavored to divert the company, he looks round and sees that nobody laughs at his jests but him. On the contrary, the mirth of the company is highly agreeable to him, and he regards this correspondence of their sentiments with his own as the greatest applause. Neither does his pleasure seem to arise altogether from the additional vivacity which his mirth may receive from sympathy with theirs, nor his pain from the disappointment he meets with when he misses this pleasure, though both the one and the other, no doubt, do in some measure. When we have read a book or poem so often that we can no longer find any amusement in reading it by ourselves, we can still take pleasure in reading it to a companion. To him it has all the graces of novelty. When we enter into the surprise and admiration which it naturally excites in him, but which it is no longer capable of exciting us, we consider all the ideas which it presents rather in the light in which they appear to him than in that which they appear to ourselves, and we are amused by sympathy with his amusement, which thus enlivens our own. On the contrary, we should be vexed if he did not seem to be entertained with it, and we could no longer take any pleasure in reading it to him. It is in the same case here. The mirth of the company no doubt enlivens our own mirth, and therefore silence no doubt disappoints us. But though this may contribute both to the pleasure which we derive from one and to the pain which we feel from the other, it is by no means the sole cause of either, and this correspondence of the sentiments of others with our own appears to be a cause of pleasure, and the want of it a cause of pain, which cannot be accounted for in this manner. The sympathy which my friends express with my joy might indeed give me pleasure by enlivening that joy, but that which they express with my grief could give me none, if it only served to enlighten that grief. Sympathy, however, enlivens joy and alleviates grief. It enlivens joy by presenting another source of satisfaction, and it alleviates grief by insinuating into the heart almost the only agreeable sensation which it is at the time capable of receiving. It is to be observed accordingly that we are still more anxious to communicate to our friends our disagreeable than our agreeable passions, that we derive still more satisfaction from their sympathy with the former than from that with the latter, and that we are still more shocked by the want of it. How are the unfortunate relieved when they have just found out a person to whom they can communicate the cause of their sorrow! Upon his sympathy they seem to disburthen themselves of a part of their distress. He is not improperly said to share it with them. He not only feels a sorrow of the same kind with that which they feel, but as if he had derived a part of it to himself, and what he feels seems to alleviate the weight of what they feel. Yet by relating to their misfortunes, they in some measure renew their grief. They awaken in their memory a remembrance of those circumstances which occasioned their affliction. Their tears accordingly flow faster than before, and they are apt to abandon themselves to all the weakness of sorrow. They take pleasure, however, in all this, and, it is evident, are sensibly relieved by it, because the sweetness of his sympathy more than compensates the bitterness of that sorrow, which, in order to excite this sympathy, the head thus enlivened and renewed, the cruelest insult, on the contrary, which can be offered to the unfortunate, is to appear to make light of their calamities. To seem not to be affected with the joy of our companions is but want of politeness, but not to wear a serious countenance when they tell us their afflictions is real and gross inhumanity. Love is an agreeable, resentment and disagreeable passion, and accordingly we are not half so anxious that our friends should adopt our friendships, as they should enter into our resentments. We can forgive them though they seem to be little affected with the favors which we may have received, but lose all patience if they seem indifferent about the injuries which may have been done to us, nor are we half so angry with them for not entering into our gratitude, as for not sympathizing with our resentment. They can easily avoid being friends to our friends, but can hardly avoid being enemies to those whom we are at variance. We seldom resent their being at enmity with the first, though upon that account we may sometimes affect to make an awkward quarrel with them, but we quarrel with them in good earnest if they live in friendship with the last. The agreeable passions of love and joy can satisfy and support the heart without any auxiliary pleasure. The bitter and painful emotions of grief and resentment more strongly require the healing consolation of sympathy. As the person who is principally interested in any event is pleased with our sympathy, and hurt by the want of it, so we too seem to be pleased when we are able to sympathize with him, and to be hurt when we are unable to do so. We run not only to congratulate the successful, but to condole with the afflicted, and the pleasure which we find in the conversation of one whom in the passions of his heart we can entirely sympathize with, seems to do more than compensate the painfulness of that sorrow with which the view of the situation affects us. On the contrary, it is always disagreeable to feel that we cannot sympathize with him, and instead of being pleased with his exemption from sympathetic pain, it hurts us to find that we cannot share his uneasiness. If we hear a person loudly lamenting his misfortunes, which however upon bringing the case home to ourselves, we feel can produce no such violent effect upon us, we are shocked at his grief, and because we cannot enter into it, call it pusillanimity and weakness. It gives us the spleen, on the other hand, to see another too happy or too much elevated, as we call it, with any little piece of good fortune. We are disobliged even with his joy, and, because we cannot go along with it, call it levity and folly. We are even put out of humour if our companion laughs louder or longer at a joke than we think it deserves, that is, than we feel that we ourselves could laugh at it.